Hey there, Emma here, and in 2023 I hosted a painting challenge called Dogtober where we painted a different dog breed every day of the month. You may have seen some of the clips that I posted on Shorts at the time, just showing like a few little clips from each painting, but I've decided to go and pull out the real-time footage and share them this year so you can follow along if you'd like to. A couple of disclaimers/explainers. The point of the challenge for me was that I wanted to try and loosen up. I'm a realistic portrait artist, and so I gave myself a smaller size to work with as well as a time frame. I'm painting on roughly about A6 size paper, which is pretty small. In terms of measurements, that's like roughly 10.5 centimeters by 14.8 centimeters or 4.1 by 5.8 inches. And I also tried to set myself a time limit of about 15 minutes. I really wanted to challenge myself to loosen up, but you can approach this any way you like. Maybe you'll do it in a different medium or a certain color palette. The options are endless, totally up to you, but you're more than welcome to follow along, and these are kind of like mini tutorials. I do want to point out though that as this was unusual for me and a challenge to me, not all of them are that good. I really struggled in the beginning to start loosening up, and particularly struggled with the long-haired dogs. But you know, it's an adventure and you'll see me progress through the month and learn a lot. If you want to grab the outline sketches, I have put all 31 sketches into a document, a PDF that you can download from my website. I will link that in the description. You'll just need to pop your email address in, which will sign you up to my mailing list, but then you'll get the document with all 31 outline sketches, roughly about the same size that I'm painting. You're more than welcome to print them, trace them, size them up or down if you need to. I'll be working with my usual set of supplies and mixing colors as well, but I will talk you through the process as we go. Let's jump in. Day 11 of Dogtober, we're painting a chihuahua. Sorry to confuse you, I've moved the little image to the top right side this time because for some reason I had all my water and stuff on the left. But we are going to get started with a revolutionary palette. I know, you've never seen orange and brown used before. We are going to reuse some of the mixture if you've got it left from yesterday. If you don't, please create an orange with red and yellow and a brown by just using part of that orange puddle and adding blue to it. Anytime you see an undertone peeking through like a green, use the opposite color on the color wheel like a red to neutralize it. And I've also just added, compared to yesterday, a little bit more blue to that orange puddle just to be a little less orangey obnoxious. We are going to get started, and I really like how this one comes together. To me, I did a really good job, I think, not to pat myself on the back too hard, but of keeping this one loose. So we're going to get started with a brown, and we're going to paint the ears in. We're just painting them both in. I've done the one towards the bottom of the dog because it's laying down. I've done that one darker, and the one that's sticking up a little bit lighter. Dipping into some orange now, and we're going to start painting the head. So sweeping that straight across the face there. Now we've got some markings around the eyes that we want to exclude for the moment. So I'm taking this up near the ears, but I'm not quite connecting them. And that's just going to keep the colors separate. You can like let them kiss in a couple spots, but let's try and keep it separate for the most part. And going around those little, it looks like it's got a mask on its face basically, going around that on its eye before taking it across the body. So I'm sweeping that color all across the back. It's a very sweet position as well, just laying down, resting on its paw. Tucking that right up against the body. And we will use some lifting techniques to define the leg and things like that. But we're just going to pop the water in, pop the color in, invite it over to the right with water. And then we can do a little bit of repair work. So I'm just going in, cleaning up the shapes of the ears, touching that one a little bit onto the face. Let it do a little bit of light blending. And now I'm going to start with this lighter color on the mask, the face. So I've just really watered more of that color off. And now I'm going around the face and just don't touch the edges. It's that easy. You can in a couple of spots. You can already see it happening right down the center of the face near, like between the eyes. You can see that I've touched it there. Also up towards the ear. You can see just on that part of the eye it's touched as well. That's okay. I think a couple spots, letting it kind of blend, it just makes it fun. But I've gone and grabbed some darker brown and I'm tucking that right up against the nose, which we have left blank. We have left the eyes and the nose blank at this stage. And what I'm going to do now is I've cleaned my brush off and I'm going to do that lifting that I talked about. So to lift colour and paint off and water off, we need a very clean, but not dry, not bone dry brush, but very, very little moisture on it. It needs to act like a vacuum cleaner. So I've gone and I've lifted off a couple patches on the back and a long stroke and then a curved one upwards to be that back leg that's tucking in and resting up against the face. I've dried that all off now, and with my large brush, because we want to keep this looking pretty loose, I'm going to pop a few strokes in to be like the little rolls as it's all curled up on the body. So I've defined the leg as well by taking this colour on the bottom of the leg, and that's going to make the top of it that we lifted off stand out even more. And same with the like the thigh, is it the thigh that's curved upwards? I've accentuated that along the left side of it, and we've popped some little rolls in along the side. Now with my really dark brown, I am painting in the little feet that are tucked in, so we can see kind of like the bottom of the foot resting under the face. And then I've just gone and also tucked one in to the right of the face as well. I'm going to use some black now to differentiate the nose, and I'm just popping that nose in. We're not bothering with the nostrils on this one. The original reference is really dark in this area at the bottom of the dog, so it was really hard to see where they'd be anyway. And then with some brown, we are popping these eyes in. This one goes really fast, doesn't it? When you don't need to like wait for things to dry off or anything, paintings move quickly, but let's pop in the eyes with some dark brown. Nothing should be wet in this area anymore, so you're welcome to fill up the whole eye space that you've had reserved. So carefully correcting the shapes on both sides, drying that all off again now, and dipping into some orangey brown. And I'm just going to do a little bit of shading here or there. So going over the eyes around the top and a little bit under the bottom, same on the other side, just in that pale fur. A little bit more on my brush, popping some over the curve of the nose and around those eyes again, just deepening up this area of the mask, if you will. Slightly darker brown on my brush now and just shading the bottom of the face. Now we're going to paint the inside of the ears. I think this really makes them pop as well. So we want to leave a couple mils on either side of these triangles that we're painting in. We're just painting the inner ears. You don't want to cover up those whole shapes, or it's not going to look as real because it'll just look like two flat things on its head. With a little bit of orangey brown on my brush, I'm just shading far side of the face just above that mask, and also on the right as well. Taking that a little bit down the right of the face. A little shadow in the center and then kind of fading that up with water if it looks a bit too unnatural. Trying to keep my strokes sketchy here. A little bit down the center of the head, little triangle there. Watering my strokes off wherever they feel a bit too heavy. Little shadow under the eye. So taking in like an inner corner there. Same on the left, giving a little bit of an inner corner. Filling that in a bit on the right, but leaving a slight little gap. A little bit of this colour around the nose as well, just as a transition colour. Dipping back into the black, and I'm just going to add a little bit to those tiny little tips of the paws. Drying that all off. And I'm doing another layer on the eyes before we move into highlight. So make them nice and dark brown. Dry that off. We can move into highlighting now. So dipping into some white on my palette, keeping it simple for these ones, just couple little highlights across the top portions of the eyes. So think of the eyes cut in two, top and a bottom. Obviously we're on an angle here as well, so take that into account. And I'm popping them in the top half area and a little bit towards the right as well. Popping a teensy little highlight on the nose, but doesn't really stand out much. Rinsing off, dabbing off, I'm going to get my brush instead, dip into some black and just deepen up the bottom side of that nose even more. Maybe help that highlight out a little bit. Rinsing off, dabbing off, getting some brown, adding a teensy bit more on the face under the nose, a little bit around the paw on the left. Again, just to try and blend it in with the painting a little bit more if it's feeling too stark in contrast. A little bit more shading under the eyes, a little bit around the top of the eye as well, just to make them feel like they belong a little bit more. Back into my tiny brush now, I'm going to dip into some black for some whiskers. So we want some really fine ones here. So I dabbed off the excess moisture and paint on my brush so it's not going to go blobby. And I'm just going to start gently curving some whiskers from that muzzle out to the right and some little ones on the left as well. It's likely leaning on some of these so they don't have to be massive, and you don't want to take them onto the floor either or that won't look natural. Couple in like an eyebrow area here, flicking out to the side. We're working with such a light coloured dog that these are really going to stand out and you don't have to worry about having to drag them out a certain distance for them to be visible. Just mixing some of what was left on my brush with some brown on the palette and doing just a little bit more shading around the eye. Be careful when you're trying to paint loose to, doing this stuff with a 3/0 brush. You can start to get detailed really quick, but I didn't do too much. Now I'm going to swap to my size 6 just to pop one last shadow on the marking between the eyes. And that is our chihuahua. I really love this one. I hope you do too, and I'll see you in the next one.